A black man boards first class, calm and confident, but within minutes he's humiliated, questioned, and accused of lying about his seat. What no one knows? He's an undercover spy, and two dangerous criminals are sitting just rows away. The time this flight lands, everything will change. Stay tuned. It was Flight 739 from New York to London, a 9-hour overnight journey across the Atlantic, scheduled to depart just before midnight. First class was a world of its own. Polished wood panels, ambient lighting, designer champagne being poured even before takeoff. The seats weren't just seats. They were mini luxury suites with lie-flat beds and digital privacy walls. Most of the cabin was filled with people who were used to this kind of comfort. Executives with custom luggage, tech founders with noise-canceling headphones, Instagram influencers adjusting their ring lights and snapping stories from their leather pods. Even a celebrity couple was quietly seated in the corner. That's when Marcus King stepped into the cabin, tall, poised mid-30s, dressed in a charcoal gray suit tailored to perfection. No chains, no logos, just class and control. He walked with quiet confidence, pulling a slim carry-on behind him. As he reached seat 1A, right at the front of the cabin, a flight attendant, young, blonde, clearly nervous, looked up and immediately tensed. She smiled, but it wasn't genuine. It was that forced customer service kind of smile. "Excuse me, sir," she said, stepping in front of him just as he was about to sit. "I think there may be some confusion. First class is for premium ticket holders." Marcus didn't flinch. He simply reached into his inside pocket and pulled out a neatly folded boarding pass. Without saying a word, he held it out to her. She took it and scanned it quickly, expecting a mistake. But her smile wavered when she saw the seat assignment, printed clearly in bold black ink. Seat 1A class. First, her eyes flicked back up to him, and then they narrowed. Still polite, still smiling, but now a little colder. She stepped aside awkwardly. "Thank you, sir. My apologies." As Marcus sat down, arranging his bag and adjusting the seat controls, the white businessman across the aisle leaned over to his companion and whispered, not quietly enough, "Maybe he's an upgrade mistake. Coach is back that way." His friend snorted. "I give it 5 minutes before they shuffle him out." Marcus heard it all. Every word. But he didn't react. Didn't even glance in their direction. Instead, he looked out the window, calm and collected. He wasn't here for a scene. He was here for a reason. Because Marcus King wasn't just a passenger. He was a covert intelligence agent. And this flight was part of an international operation. From the outside, Marcus looked like any successful black businessman. The tailored suit, the minimal accessories, the quiet confidence. But that was intentional. His appearance was part of his cover. In truth, Marcus worked for a multinational security task force, part U.S. intelligence, part MI6, part something so classified it didn't even have an official name. And tonight, on Flight 739, his job was to observe and intercept. A dangerous arms dealer, one known to change identities and locations faster than governments could track, was suspected to be on board. Interpol had tracked him to New York. Now, he was heading to London under a fake name. No arrest was to be made mid-air. Too risky. Marcus's job was simple: confirm the suspect's identity, monitor the in-flight exchange of a flash drive, and signal the team waiting at Heathrow. Everything had to look natural. Everything had to feel smooth. Even the seat he chose, 1A, wasn't random. It gave him the best angle to observe several rows back without drawing attention. But now, with the whispered remarks and quiet stares, Marcus was making a different kind of observation. Bias, assumption, discomfort, the same old story. People didn't question the drunk hedge fund guy with his loud Rolex and louder mouth. They didn't blink at the young blonde influencer filming skincare routines at midnight. But a calm black man sitting in first class with no explanation? That triggered suspicion. Still, Marcus wasn't angry. He was focused. He used every second to observe, discreetly studying faces, behaviors, nervous glances, hand movements. And then he spotted him. Seat 3B. Middle-aged, balding, tinted glasses. The man kept checking his phone. glancing around every few minutes, and hadn't touched a single thing offered by the attendants. His passport at check-in had raised subtle red flags. The name matched one Interpol flagged just days ago in a weapons trafficking alert. Marcus pressed lightly on his cufflink, activating a tiny transmitter hidden inside. A simple phrase was all it took. Target visual confirmed. Window seat. Row 3. His voice was calm, barely above a whisper, but clear enough for the encrypted mic to catch and send through satellite to the command team in London. Then he leaned back, pretended to sip the champagne he hadn't even touched, watched, waited. The businessman across the aisle threw another glance his way. Guy looks like he's planning something, he muttered. He had no idea how right he was. But what he didn't know was Marcus wasn't the threat. He was the only thing keeping this flight safe. Half an hour into the flight, the cabin lights dimmed and the gentle hum of the engines settled into the background like a heartbeat. Most of the passengers reclined their seats or began scrolling through in-flight entertainment. But in first class, not everyone was resting easy. The white businessman across the aisle, the same one who questioned Marcus at boarding, was now well into his third glass of scotch. His voice had gotten louder, his words less filtered. He leaned across the aisle toward Marcus with a sloppy grin. Honestly, man, you don't look like a first-class kind of guy. What do you do? The cabin got a little quieter. The celebrity couple in the corner pretended not to listen. A young tech founder paused his movie, earbuds out. Marcus slowly turned his head. His expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened, slightly. Let's just say, security. The man laughed, sloshing his drink a little. You mean like TSA or something? No, Marcus said, his voice calm and level. A bit more international. That earned a louder laugh. Another man a few rows back leaned over and chimed in. Come on, don't play James Bond with us. There was a round of chuckles. Even the flight attendant standing near the galley looked away awkwardly. Marcus didn't react. He sat perfectly still, hands resting on the armrests, gaze steady. But beneath the stillness, his mind was in motion. The reactions, the looks, the whispers, none of it was unfamiliar. But it wasn't what had his full attention. From the moment he boarded, Marcus had been scanning, watching every face, every movement, looking for anything out of place. Because this wasn't a vacation. This wasn't a business trip. This was a live operation, and he was the only person on board who knew it. His eyes flicked for the third time to seat 3B, a man in his late 40s. Slightly hunched posture, balding, with glasses that seemed too dark for cabin lighting. He hadn't spoken to anyone, hadn't eaten, hadn't looked up from his phone in 20 minutes, but Marcus had already done his homework. Interpol had flagged the passport earlier that week. The name belonged to a retired engineer. The face matched a different identity last seen at a black market auction in Prague. The man's fingerprints, captured discreetly from a hotel wine glass, linked him to 2 illegal arms transfers across Eastern Europe. This was the man, and this flight was his cover. Marcus tapped lightly on his watch, the movement casual. A small vibration pulsed, confirmation that his earlier signal had reached the team waiting in London. His cufflink, discreetly embedded with a microphone, had already transmitted the target's location. Row 3, window seat. The mission parameters were clear. No confrontation, no sudden moves. Confirm identity, monitor the exchange, and ensure safe tracking upon arrival. Marcus shifted slightly, angling himself to better view the aisle without turning his head. The businessman was still staring at him, clearly not satisfied. You look real serious, man, he said, trying to provoke something. Bet you've got some wild story, huh? Or is it just all for show? Marcus gave him a faint smile. You ever hear the saying, the quietest guy in the room is usually the one watching everything? The man blinked, confused for a second, before laughing again. Yeah, okay, sure, Sherlock. The others nearby gave nervous smiles, unsure whether to engage or retreat. The tension hovered in the air, awkward and invisible, but Marcus didn't care about their opinions. What he did care about was the moment when the man in 3B finally looked up from his phone and stood. He moved slowly toward the front of the cabin, brushing past Marcus's row, heading for the restroom. On his way, he paused for a split second near Marcus's seat. It looked casual, innocent. He reached toward Marcus's tray table. "Mind if I borrow a napkin?" he asked, his voice calm but clearly intentional. Marcus didn't look at him right away. Then he turned and replied evenly, "You know, I prefer my coffee black." To any casual listener, it was a meaningless exchange. But both men knew better. It was coded language, phrases arranged ahead of time by intelligence handlers to confirm identities in the field. As the man reached for the napkin, his hand briefly touched Marcus's tray. A tiny flash drive, hidden between his fingers, slid beneath a folded packet of sugar. The transfer took less than a second. Marcus didn't touch it. Not yet. Instead, he remained seated, arms crossed. The man continued down the aisle and disappeared into the restroom. The businessman across from Marcus raised an eyebrow, clearly suspicious but too drunk to know what he'd just witnessed. "Coffee black, huh?" he mumbled, smirking. "You're real mysterious." Marcus didn't respond. He leaned back slightly, his eyes now scanning more than just 3B. That man was the target, but he wasn't working alone. Someone else on the flight had to be watching, protecting, possibly armed. And Marcus had just made himself visible to them. The next steps had to be flawless. The flash drive would stay untouched until touchdown. London authorities would intercept it after Marcus left the plane. But for now, all he had to do was sit still and make sure no one knew just how much he knew. The flight attendant passed by, offering another round of drinks. She paused at Marcus's seat but said nothing. The look on her face was less annoyed now, more confused, as if she'd started to suspect there was more to him than a smooth suit and quiet manners. She wasn't wrong. But Marcus didn't give her or anyone else the satisfaction of explanation, because explaining was for people with something to prove, and Marcus King didn't need to prove anything. Not here, not to them. Not when he was holding the key to stopping an international arms deal, right beneath his coffee cup. Marcus King worked for a US-UK Joint Intelligence Task Force, an elite and covert unit operating above national politics, formed specifically to dismantle global arms networks, the kind that never made the news, the kind that moved billions without anyone knowing. His current mission had been planned for weeks. Confirm the identity of the arms broker on Flight 739, observe the in-air transfer of sensitive data, and signal the extraction team awaiting at Heathrow. Everything had gone according to plan so far. The surveillance, the tracking, the false documents. The target had boarded using a fabricated name, passed security with a fake passport, and taken his assigned seat, 3B. Marcus, seated up front in 1A, had the perfect vantage point. He'd already sent confirmation of the man's presence through his cufflink mic, encrypted and transmitted through the aircraft's Wi-Fi system. He wasn't just observing. He was reading. Every fidget, every glance. The target had been still for most of the flight, but now he stirred. Without making eye contact, the man stood, smoothed his blazer, and walked casually down the aisle toward the front of the plane. Marcus kept his gaze relaxed, as if he wasn't watching. He knew the timing. He could feel it. "Mind if I borrow a napkin?" the man asked, gesturing lightly at Marcus's tray table. His tone was calm, unbothered. Just another polite passenger mid-flight. But Marcus knew better. The napkin was a prop. The question, a coded gesture, prearranged language that verified both men were who they claimed to be. Without hesitation, Marcus responded, "You know, I prefer my coffee black." It was subtle, clean. No hesitation, no emphasis. Just enough for the microphone in his cufflink to catch it clearly and send it to headquarters, where analysts and field command were listening in real time. The man reached for the napkin. His hand barely hovered over Marcus's tray, and in that motion, a flicker quicker than a blink, he slid a tiny black flash drive, no larger than a thumbnail, beneath the corner of the napkin. Marcus didn't move. He didn't touch it. He didn't acknowledge it had happened. That part of the mission was complete. Then it hit. The plane dropped slightly, just a few feet, but enough to shake the cabin. A sudden jolt of turbulence rippled through the aircraft. Drinks spilled, glasses clattered. Someone yelped. The overhead lights flickered briefly. The man in 3B stumbled back, catching himself on the headrest of seat 2C. A few passengers gasped, clutching their armrests. The flight attendants froze mid-step, then quickly moved to secure carts and check on passengers. Marcus instinctively braced himself, one hand gripping the armrest. His body didn't show it, but his mind raced. Moments like these were dangerous. In chaos, things got messy. Eyes wandered. People paid attention to things they normally wouldn't. Any sudden movement now, reaching for the tray, adjusting the napkin, could draw suspicion. Worse, it could be misinterpreted by anyone else on the flight involved in the deal. There was a good chance the target wasn't alone. Marcus kept his composure. He glanced casually at the napkin, now slightly off-center from the jolt, but the flash drive remained tucked beneath it, untouched and nearly invisible. His heart rate slowed again. No one had seen it. The cover held. The man gave a subtle nod and returned to his seat. But the tension didn't vanish with him. Marcus scanned the cabin again, this time more carefully. He knew the turbulence wasn't just atmospheric. Something was off. The way the target had hesitated, the way he scanned the rows on his way back. There was a twitch in his eye, a kind of urgency that hadn't been there earlier. Marcus shifted slightly in his seat, hands resting casually. But he was alert now, watching, not just the target but the others around him. The woman in 4A who hadn't spoken to anyone, the man in 2D who kept tapping at his phone even after the Wi-Fi was down. Were they watchers too? Part of the network? Or agents from another agency, unknown even to his own task force? He tapped his watch 3 times. That simple motion, almost imperceptible, sent a silent flag to command. Possible secondary threat. Down the aisle, the flight attendants announced that turbulence had passed and began resetting the drink service. Passengers murmured softly, settling back into their routines. The moment had passed, but Marcus knew the mission wasn't finished. He glanced out. The window saw only the inky blackness of the Atlantic below. Another 6 hours to London. 6 hours to protect the drive, avoid detection, and disembark without giving himself away. If the target realized who he was before they landed, the entire operation could be compromised. Worse, if any hostile counter-surveillance was on board, Marcus's life could be in real danger. His mind replayed the transfer. Smooth, clean, perfect timing, even with the turbulence. And now the flash drive sat beneath a napkin, unnoticed, its contents encrypted with names, accounts, and plans that could dismantle half a dozen arms deals in motion. Marcus reached slowly for his coffee cup, fingers brushing the tray just enough to confirm the drive was still there, still hidden. He leaned back in his seat, closed his eyes as if preparing to sleep, but remained fully aware. The game wasn't over. It had just entered the quietest and most dangerous part, the waiting, the pretending, the holding of breath. Somewhere at Heathrow, agents would be tracking his seat, the flight logs, the bag scans. But up here at 36,000 feet, he was alone. The man in 3B leaned his head back, eyes closed, but Marcus saw the way his fingers twitched. The flight might have smoothed out, but beneath the surface, the real turbulence had just begun. The tension in first class had just started to settle after the turbulence. The lights were low again, passengers adjusting blankets and sipping their drinks. But not everyone was calm. The same white businessman, his cheeks flushed from alcohol, his tone more emboldened, stood up and pointed at Marcus. "You know what? I'm gonna say it," he said loudly, drawing glances from nearby seats. "This guy doesn't belong here." He waved a hand toward Marcus like he was a piece of furniture. "We've been flying for hours and he still hasn't told anyone what he does. That accent isn't even American. I bet he used someone else's ticket." The flight attendant, returning from the galley, stopped in her tracks. She looked from the man to Marcus, confused. unsure if this was a drunken outburst or something more serious. A few passengers peeked over their seats. A hush fell over the cabin. Marcus slowly turned his head toward the man. He had stayed seated during the first half of the rant, but now he rose. Controlled and deliberate, not rushed, not defensive. Calm. "I've been polite," Marcus said evenly, his voice low but powerful. "But you're starting to interfere with something way above your pay grade." That silenced the businessman for a beat, but only a beat. He scoffed, laughed nervously, then threw up his hands. "Oh, is that a threat? You gonna arrest me, agent?" There was mockery in his voice, but also fear. Marcus could see it, the kind that came when someone realizes they've just underestimated the wrong person. Marcus took one step closer and leaned in slightly, lowering his voice enough that only those nearby could hear. "I could," he said calmly. "But I'll let Heathrow security handle you when they find out what you're hiding in that briefcase." The man's grin disappeared. His posture stiffened, like he'd been slapped. For the first time since boarding, he didn't have anything to say, because now he knew. Marcus had known all along. This wasn't some drunk, racist executive. He was a courier, part of the very network Marcus had been assigned to monitor. The flash drive slipped onto Marcus's tray was only half the operation. The other half was physical. Documents, contacts, or data being transported the old-fashioned way. And it had been in the businessman's briefcase the entire time. The flight attendant looked completely lost. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you both to return to your seats, please." Marcus glanced at her, then back at the man. "He's fine," he said. "He's not going anywhere." The man opened his mouth again, perhaps to protest, to lie, or to bluff. But he stopped. He knew Marcus wasn't guessing. He knew. Marcus lowered his voice even further. "You were never supposed to interact with me. Just sit quietly and make the drop at the terminal. But then you decided to get bold. Bad move." The businessman glanced nervously at the overhead bins, as if calculating his chances of grabbing the briefcase and making a scene. "Don't," Marcus said, reading his thoughts instantly. "You make a move and I signal the pilot. You'll be zip-tied and cuffed before we hit Irish airspace." The man swallowed hard and sat back down without another word. The cabin breathed again, but not completely. Something had changed. Some of the first-class passengers had pieced together fragments, whispers of agent, the look on the businessman's face, the way Marcus carried himself. They weren't sure what was happening, but they knew something was. Marcus sat back down too, eyes forward, but every sense on alert. The flight attendant quietly approached him a few minutes later. "Sir," she said softly, "do you need me to report anything to the captain?" Marcus shook his head. "Not yet, but I appreciate your discretion." She nodded and walked away without asking further questions. He tapped a small pattern on his watch. Second asset confirmed. Compromised. Courier detained. Prepare secure handoff. Thousands of feet below them, the Atlantic stretched endlessly. But above, in that pressurized metal tube, secrets were being passed, players were revealing themselves, and an international takedown was already in motion. Marcus adjusted his cuff. The flash drive still sat hidden beneath the napkin, untouched. His carry-on contained encrypted mobile equipment. The briefcase, now 2 rows behind him, would be scanned the moment it touched UK soil. There were still hours left in the flight. Anything could happen. But Marcus knew now the pieces were falling into place. The primary target in 3B had made the digital drop. The courier had exposed himself foolishly and was now under watch. And Marcus? He was exactly where he needed to be. He looked down at his untouched coffee, then out the window into the dark. Somewhere beyond the clouds, the morning was waiting, along with justice, along with the team that would receive the evidence and finish what had started up here, at 36,000 feet. The mission had changed shape mid-air, but Marcus King didn't just adapt. He thrived in chaos. And now 2 criminals who thought they were invisible were quietly trapped in a sky they couldn't escape from. By the time wheels touched down in London, Marcus wouldn't have to say another word. His work would speak for itself. The wheels touched down at Heathrow with a soft jolt, the cabin filling with the sounds of buckles clicking and phones turning back on. To most, it was just another international landing. But for a select few on board Flight 739, it marked the final moment of a mission that had been playing out in plain sight. As the aircraft taxied to the gate, several passengers began to rise before the seatbelt light had even blinked off. But they didn't reach for their bags or stretch their legs. They were coordinated, quiet, unmistakable in their purpose. Agents, Interpol, British intelligence, even a few plainclothes members of MI5. All had boarded at JFK under fake identities, carefully scattered across the plane. Each had a role, each had a target. Now, in a fluid, silent choreography, they rose like chess pieces moving into checkmate. The flight attendant, who had earlier questioned Marcus's presence in first class, watched, confused and wide-eyed, as one of the agents gestured toward the rude businessman in seat 1C. "Mr. Lawson," the agent said quietly, showing a badge. "We need you to come with us." The businessman stood abruptly, voice cracking with a mixture of panic and rage. "You set me up. This was a setup. I want a lawyer." He tried to pull his briefcase from the overhead bin, but two agents were already there. They took it from him without resistance. He knew better now. The fight was over. In the rear of the cabin, another passenger, a quiet, unassuming man who had barely spoken the entire flight, suddenly bolted from his seat. Seat 3B, the arms broker. He shoved a tray, cart out of his way, startling a flight attendant, and rushed toward the front of the plane, but he didn't make it far. Two more agents appeared from business class, moving fast but calm. One caught him at the curtain divider. The other had already drawn zip ties from his pocket. It was over in seconds. The man went down with a grunt. Pinned against the galley floor, the curtain yanked back for all to see. Passengers gasped. Some pulled out their phones, others froze in disbelief. The air was no longer just heavy with jet lag. It was filled with shock, confusion, and the unmistakable scent of justice finally served. Meanwhile, Marcus King had remained, seated through all of it, composed, collected, eyes steady. He waited until the commotion had settled and the seatbelt light dinged off. Only then did he unbuckle and retrieve his carry-on. One bag, nothing flashy, nothing suspicious. He moved down the aisle like any other businessman heading to a meeting. No weapons, no fanfare, just purpose in his stride. When he reached the front of the plane, he stopped. The flight attendant was standing there, still in her pressed uniform, her hands trembling slightly. She was staring at him, eyes wide with realization. "You," she whispered. I'm sorry, I didn't know." Her words trailed off. The uniform, the composure, the salute one of the agents had just given him. She understood now. Marcus paused, adjusting his collar. His face gave away nothing, no anger, no gloating, just the cool detachment of someone used to being underestimated. "That's the thing," he said quietly, meeting her eyes. "You never do." And with that, he turned and walked down the jet bridge, disappearing into the swell of passengers, moving toward customs. No press, no headlines, just the silent respect of those who knew what had really happened. Outside the terminal, unmarked cars waited. One of them would take the briefcase, another would secure the flash drive. Debriefings would begin within the hour. Arrests in 5 countries would follow within days, triggered by the information obtained mid-air. Marcus would file his report and move on to the next operation. There was always another flight, another target, another name on a list no one was supposed to see. But for now, he stepped into the crowd, blending in as easily as he had blended in at takeoff. Just another man in a sea of travelers, calm, focused, gone. Behind him, the agents escorted the businessman and the arms broker off, the plane each flanked by 2 officers. Passengers murmured and pointed. Some recorded. None understood the full story. The flight attendant stood alone at the aircraft door, still watching the place where Marcus had disappeared. There were no medals in this line of work, no awards or newspaper clippings, Just moments like this, when the real heroes didn't need applause because the mission was enough. And somewhere in the sky above, the next mission was already waiting. If this story gave you chills, imagine how many secrets go unnoticed every day. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss another powerful story like this. Thanks for watching. And remember, not everything is as it seems.